to update you on the project design and to hear your comments. This meeting is being interpreted in Spanish, Portuguese, Mandarin, Chinese, Cantonese, and Haitian Creole. I'll ask each of our interpreters to introduce themselves one by one, speaking in the language that they will be interpreting this evening. In Spanish, we have Susana Carrella.
Muy buenas noches, bienvenidos y gracias por reunirse. Mi nombre es Susana y les voy a dar interpretación en español. Por favor, presione el icono del globo para entrar a la sala de español.
Thank you. In Portuguese, we have Lolita Burgo.
Olá, boa noite, bem-vindos a essa reunião em virtual. Meu nome é Lolita, eu vou estar fazendo a tradução toda em português e estaremos juntos numa sala em português.
Thank you. In Mandarin, we have Teresa Lai.
Sorry, Teresa is just joining the panel now. She'll unmute herself in a moment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, okay, I got it. 你们好，我叫 Teresa， 今天我是你们的中文翻译。
Thank you. In Cantonese, we have Michael Chang.
Hello， 你們好，我叫做 Michael Chan， 就今日係你哋個中文英文翻譯員，你好。
Thank you. In Haitian, my apologies. In Haitian Creole, we have Esther Paul. Esther, are you there?
Pardon me, Esther, I think you may have gone into the Creole language channel a little bit too early.
Okay, thank you.
Alan, why don't you move on and we'll get Esther back.
Very good. In addition, card services are being provided by Stephanie Farrell of the Massachusetts Commission for Deaf and Hard of Hearing. I want to thank each of our interpreters and our card provider for their support this evening. This hearing is being recorded. Before we begin, Representative Ryan would like to say a few words. Representative Ryan, are you on? Jeff, can we hear Representative Ryan?
You should be able to. Rep Ryan, if you can unmute yourself.
Yep. Here.
We got you, Danny. Thank you.
See my picture, but hopefully you guys can see me. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. And before we get started, I guess I just want to not only thank Bill Conroy and the Boston Transportation Department for moving this forward, but thank you, MassDOT and Boston BTW, DPW. I believe the BPDA is on here also. There's a lot of hands in on this project for a very good reason. It is in the reason why we have so many people at the table is that as much as this is a road that impacts Charlestown, it is also a regional road. It was built that way. It always has been. We can fight that as much as we want, and we want a better road, and that's what we're going to end up with. And I just want to talk a little bit about the history of this area. In 1998, there's a Rutherford Avenue corridor study done or completed. The Big Dig still had not been done. The Bunker Hill Lennox Aiken Bridge still had not been open, and we were already talking about Rutherford Avenue having outlived its proper life. Here we are 22 years later, 21 years later, we're still discussing Rutherford Avenue for a whole bunch of reasons. There's nobody to point fingers at. There's nobody to blame. It's just what it is. It is a confluence of four major cities, Cambridge, Somerville, Everett, And actually even Mystic Ave in Medford is closer to my house than the State House is. And I walk to the State House every day. And that's why it is such a regional conversation that we're having for our local Charlestown Road. What can we do as a community to advocate for the best possible road we can get that has bicycle access, has pedestrian access, is to come together and let the people at the table know. Let MassDOT know. Let those other cities and towns know. Let the rest of Boston know. We are the only neighborhood north of the Charles River. And sometimes we feel, actually most of the time when you listen to people in Charlestown, we feel that isolated from the rest of Boston. It is our time now to sit at the table and let the people know that are making decisions, it is our turn. We want this road fixed, not just to stop the traffic that flows, not just onto Main Street, but up over Bunker Hill Street and then onto our side streets. We want to get that traffic out of here, but we also want to have pedestrian and bicycle access to all the points that make Charlestown such a great place to live. We're 1 or 2 miles from downtown Boston, 1 mile from Assembly Road, 1 mile from Kendall Square. We can get there with the right access for both pedestrians, bicycles, and yes, there will be cars in our future. Hopefully less cars than there are now, but we're going to live in an automobile society. That is, and we're going to live on a route that takes trucks. It is still an industrial area. So I want to thank the Transportation Department really for pushing this along, because we were stuck in a 10-year limbo where there was federal money sitting there. And as I said before, it's nobody's fault. But if I'm making decisions and I live on the other side of Boston, I'm sure there's roads over on the other side of Boston that need care too, that I'm not too worried about. So it's time for us to come together, talk to the people at hand here, sitting at the table, let them know we want this road built. We want the best possible road we can get that gets our folks to where they want to be without impacting the rest of Charlestown. And I think we're there. I think this 25% design gets us there. And I'm here to listen. I'll be on for the entire night. So I hope that sets the table for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Ryan. Appreciate it. Jeff Dietrich will now go over how to use the Zoom during hearing. Go ahead, Jeff.
Good evening, everyone. As Alan said, my name is Jeff Dietrich. We were engaged to help the project team run this design public hearing virtually. Obviously, you know, these meetings have usually been at the Knights of Columbus, and while I'm sitting at my home in Charlestown tonight with the sun shining in right on my face, we wanted to make sure we talked through how to make this happen virtually so everyone is comfortable with it. I know folks in Charlestown are now very used to running virtual meetings as we are around the state, but we are using the Zoom platform tonight. As Alwyn mentioned at the top, we're interpreting this meeting into 5 languages. You can click the globe icon as each of the interpreters said at the beginning to change your audio feed. And if you're listening in English, we encourage you to click the English channel as well. Now, we'll be running a presentation at first, like a design public hearing sort of traditional order of operations. But throughout that whole presentation, which Eric will give, we encourage you to use the Q&A feature to ask your questions while they're fresh in your mind. So if you think of something, open up the Q&A box, type it in, and then when we get to the discussion portion of the evening, we'll read those out in order received. You can also raise your hand if you would prefer to offer a comment verbally. The slide also shows the dial-in number in case any of our audio or video is breaking up and you'd rather listen by phone. And my cell phone number is up on the screen in case anybody has technology trouble throughout the meeting. You can just shoot me a message, give me a call, and I will do what I can to help you out. So one other piece I wanted to address on the next slide here, this meeting is being recorded. So the disclaimer that comes with that notification, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation may choose to retain and distribute that video, still images, audio, and/or the transcript. By continuing to attend the virtual public hearing, you are consenting to participate in that recorded event. If you're not comfortably being recorded, please keep your camera off, keep your microphone muted, and refrain from chatting in the transcript box. You can also choose to excuse yourself from the live hearing, and the recording will be posted online, and you can offer comments in a non-recorded fashion. Other important notes, as you may have noticed, your microphone and webcam are automatically disabled upon entering the meeting. That's so that we can get through the presentation and leave as much uninterrupted time for questions, comments, and discussion as we can. One other note, because of this virtual format, when the webinar ends at 8 p.m. or later, depending on when we wrap up, there will be a survey that's sent out. We ask you to please fill that out. It's 4 questions, just trying to get a sense of how outreach for this meeting worked and to make sure that the virtual format made sense to you. Again, my phone number is on that slide if you need any tech support during the presentation. And one last thing, I know we say this in front of every meeting. I know my neighbors in Charlestown do this already, but I just wanted to note that it's important that in order to welcome and appreciate any comments that we receive throughout the course of this hearing, we do request that everyone keep it civil. Remember that we're all talking as neighbors. Like I said, I know we all do that already. We put it in every slide. So with that, I will turn it back over to the project team to give the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. The project panel this evening will consist of members from MassDOT and the City of Boston. For MassDOT, we have Erin Kenahan, who represents District 6. She's the acting project development engineer. And we also have Craig Sheehan. He's the right-of-way community compliance officer. And for the City of Boston, we have Bill Conroy from the City of Boston Transportation Department and Eric Mackey from the consultant firm Tetra Tech, who's a designer on the project. Helping us with Zoom controls, as I mentioned before, is Jeff Dietrich and Nate Cabral Curtis from Howard Stein Hudson. And our stenographer this evening is Greg Tarbucks from ATM. If we can go to the agenda slide. Here we go. Thank you. For the agenda this evening, we'll be covering all of these topics that are provided in this slide. We're going to start with the background, the project goals, existing challenges, design elements, corridor segments, traffic, resiliency, construction, and in the end will be public comments. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. The notice of the public hearing appeared in the Charlestown Patriot Bridge on June 11th and 18th, and in the Boston Globe on June 9th and 16th. The purpose of this public hearing is to provide the public with information about the proposed reconstruction of Rutherford Avenue. The roadway corridor, as some of you may know, is failing, and the corresponding bridges are considered to some degree deficient. Our main concern, and above all, is safety. Significant improvements to the corridor are anticipated once the project has been completed. The project is currently at the 25% design stage. The project needs to be advanced in order for the project not to lose its window of opportunity. The advertisement date for construction procurement is currently in the first quarter of 2023. Construction should take about 4 seasons. The current construction cost is approximately $177 million. In order for us to advertise the project, we need to secure environmental permits and right-of-way before the first quarter of 2023. 80% of the cost will be funded by the Federal Highway Administration. The state of Massachusetts will fund the remaining 20%. And now Craig Sheehan will explain the right-of-way procedure. Craig?
Thank you, Alan. When the Commonwealth, acting through its Massachusetts Department of Transportation Highway Division, indicated it would accept this project for funding, your municipality accepted certain responsibilities. One of those responsibilities is acquiring all the necessary rights in private and public lands for the design, construction, and implementation of this project. My function as a community compliance officer assigned to the project is to review and recommend procedures that your municipality may use in acquiring these rights. Procedures used must comply with both federal and state regulations. Current right-of-way design plans, which may be found on the project website, indicate that there are 28 permanent easements and 76 temporary easements that may be required. Property owners impacted by this project will be contacted by your municipal officials or their designated representatives. They will present the proposed impacts to each owner and discuss the methods with which they may acquire the needed rights for the project. Frequently, municipalities may appeal for donations to minimize the acquisition cost for your community. However, donations are not required, and property owners are entitled to an appraisal, review appraisal, and just compensation. Right-of-way documents will be provided to each owner to help them understand the acquisition process and how the project affects their property. Affected property owners' rights are protected under our Mass General laws, primarily Chapter 79, and because this project is receiving federal funds, property owners' rights are further defined under Title III of the Real Property Acts of 1970 as amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate it. Let's move forward with Bill Conroy and Eric Mackey, who will describe the project design in detail. Bill?
Thank you, Alan. Good evening. My name is William Conroy, and I am the project manager for the City of Boston for the Sullivan Square Rutherford Avenue project. As Alan Ramirez from Mass DOT has stated, this is a 25% public hearing that is required for Mass DOT. As most of you know, this has been a long time coming. I personally have been involved in this project for over 13 years, and some of you probably a lot more longer. If you go to the City of Boston project website, you will be able to access all our meetings from 2008 to present day. We will also be posting this meeting on our project website as well. I'd like to thank Acting Mayor Kim Janey, Representatives Danny Ryan, Sal Domenico, Congresswoman Ayanna Presley, City Councilor Lydia Edwards, Mayor Di Maria, and Mayor Curtatone, my colleagues at Mass DOT, Federal Highway Administration, the Boston Metropolitan Planning Organization, Metropolitan Area Planning Council, Central Transportation Planning staff, and Massport for their continuous support of this project. Because frankly, without their support, there would be no project. This public hearing signifies a significant milestone for the Rutherford Avenue Sullivan Square project, meaning that it is now finally at the threshold of being built. This 25% milestone will take us to 100% design in June of 2022, and then on to construction in the spring of 2023. This project is fully funded by the MPO with a current construction cost of $175 million. This project will provide a new gateway into Charlestown and will create the footprint of other projects in the future. Our design has right-sized the road, creating bike and multi-path configurations by creating over 5 acres of public ground. We have elements of a BRT in the Sullivan Square, as well as portions of Rutherford Avenue. While this project is not creating a full BRT, we are not precluding it and possibly in the future. As part of the Charlestown Resiliency Study, we are raising a portion of Main Street near the firehouse 3.5 feet to prevent storm water runoff. Finally, I would like to say that we are here to hear you and answer your questions to the best of our abilities. After all, this is the project for the residents of Charlestown. I will now hand it off to my colleague for the last 4 years, Eric Mackey from Tetra Tech.
Thanks a lot, Bill. Let me get my slide advanced here. What I'd like to do tonight is walk you through the project and go segment by segment. There's a lot to cover. It's a complicated project. There's a lot of design elements, but what I have on the slide right now is the overall project limits. It's about almost 1.5 miles long, and we're starting down at the City Square end. I'll take you up through the Tobin ramps, continue northbound to Austin Street and the Gilmore Bridge. We'll continue north past the Bunker Hill Community College, the Hood Business Park, up to Sullivan Square, and show you Martha Way up to Somerville, and also Alfred Street over to the bridge heading to Everett. So what is it that we want to accomplish? We've been talking about the project goals for years, as Bill has mentioned, and the #1 goal is to improve safety for all users. We also want to improve pedestrian, bicycle, and transit mobility, decrease traffic congestion, and try to protect the neighborhood from cut-through traffic, create some open space and transit-oriented development parcels, We're going to be providing separate bicycle paths. And another goal is to remove the Sullivan Square rotary and convert to a more traditional city street grid system. Also for the structural elements, to bring those up to a state of good repair. So what are the existing challenges? Well, you can see some of them on this photo right here. The corridor hasn't had a lot of maintenance over the years. You can see elements of the old overpass still in place that has not been completely removed. So it's been untouched for quite some time. Some of the existing challenges on the corridor have been identified through an independent road safety audit for the traffic aspect of the project. And this includes things such as that they identified traffic congestion and confusing lane designations, poor pavement and sidewalk surface conditions. Signal equipment is old, the pedestrian and bicycle accommodations are lacking, high speed of traffic on the corridor, and also transit is poorly supported, as well as lighting and traffic signage. So before I get into showing you the plan, just to touch upon traffic data a little bit, we did collect traffic data back in 2017, and then we also collected some supplemental data in 2019 after the casino was opened. We know that during this pandemic period, there's been quite a fluctuation of traffic from 0 and now back to, I guess, 100%. According to the Globe article the other day, traffic is back to its pre-pandemic levels. But what they say in the article is true. It's really much different right now. So I think people see opportunities to drive their cars into the city because so many people were working from home, and we know not a lot of people are taking public transportation yet again. So we're planning on taking new counts sometime this fall and winter, once everything is maybe a little bit more back to normal. But getting back to what the data that we have right now, Rutherford Avenue, north of Austin Street, has about 58,500 cars a day. So there's significant travel on this corridor. The Sullivan Square Underpass has 26,000 vehicles a day in the underpass. And what's interesting there is you can see that about 3/4 of that traffic is always in the southbound direction. Likewise, at Austin Street carries about 33,500 vehicles a day within the underpass. And we see similar metrics that 3/4 of that traffic is in the southbound direction. So we've taken this information and it's helped inform our design when we do the road diet, and you'll see that on the plans. So what are the project design elements? What I'm going to show you tonight, and I've got them summarized here, are the overall plan is to right size the road. We want to shrink the roadway as much as we can, still maintaining these regional connections, but let's look hard at the lane widths, the median widths, and the underpasses, and what can we do to right size this road. The project will include full reconstruction of the roadway, the bridges, and the underpasses. We are going to be able to have separated bike lanes for the full length of the corridor, which is terrific. We're doing the road diet and expanding the pedestrian realm. It's very important for us to have better transit, bike and pedestrian mobility. So having nice, comfortable sidewalks that are safe and work well at the traffic lights is important. Also, the raised crossings at driveways and uncontrolled side streets will be raised so that pedestrians are at sidewalk level as they cross those. It makes it more visible and safe for pedestrians. All the intersections will get new traffic control equipment, state-of-the-art equipment. We're also going to show you some transit improvements with some dedicated bus lanes and some queue jump lanes. And then there's a resiliency component, as Alwyn had mentioned. So getting into the different corridor segments, I'm going to start down here at City Square. We are matching up to the North Washington Street project, which is currently under construction. And as I had mentioned, with the traffic volumes, we see that there's less traffic in the northbound direction. So that is where we're taking advantage of that with the overcapacity of lanes that are out there today. And we can implement the road diet on the northbound side. So where I have my pointer now, this is where we're going to shrink the pavement and implement the separated two-way bike path, separate sidewalks. We're going to raise the intersection at the cross streets and driveways so that they're sidewalk level to make it safer for pedestrians crossing. And also here we've got in red, these are the bus queue jump lanes. So this lane here at City Square extends back to the Toburn Bridge ramp, and that's where the Route 111 MBTA bus comes down into the corridor. So we can add this lane and then match into the lane on the North Washington Street Bridge. With all ramps on this project, such as this one here at I-93 southbound, we're going to squeeze the width of the ramp as much as we can so that we can expand the pedestrian space. And any work that we do on the edges of City Square Park will be done respectfully and basically trying not to touch that as much as we can. Coming up here to the Tobin ramps, we are adding a new crosswalk on the south side here. This is a really nice crosswalk because it can operate with no conflicts from vehicles. So when the off ramp is got the green light, pedestrians can cross at the same time, totally protected with no conflicts. We're adding this bus queue jump lane to the off ramp. That again benefits the Route 111 bus. And then on the northbound side, you can see we continue the road diet northerly with the separated bike lanes and the sidewalk. We might also have an opportunity to make a pedestrian connection to Lynn Street because there's this triangular piece of land that is owned by the BPDA that they're going to give to Public Works for the project. Let's move on to the next intersection. So here we have the Austin Street and Gilmore Bridge connection. What we're doing here is a pretty significant narrowing of the underpass. Today it's a 6-lane underpass. We're going to narrow it down to just 3 lanes. And what we gain is helpful for the pedestrian and bicycle realm. We can shift the whole roadway over and we gain all this nice sidewalk space at the corners of Austin Street for the path system. This is like a traffic calming element with sharper turns here, so cars make the turns slower. We gain a significant amount of sidewalk space where the pedestrian bridge is today. And we're planning for a brand new bridge that's wider and it has the appropriate length ramps so that they meet ADA guidelines. It's not too steep. As we continue across the intersection, we're going to remove that southbound U-turn and dedicate that space for sidewalk. And again, we're also going to squeeze the ramps as much as we can to increase the pedestrian islands, including on the community college side. And one thing we're looking to do is when we build the new bridge, we want to have a rampway down to the city sidewalk so that you're just not up on the plaza for the college. Next slide here is at the community college driveway. So here is a spot where we're creating a brand new intersection. So we're breaking through the median barrier on Rutherford Ave. We're creating a new full access intersection for the college driveway. But also we're gaining these crosswalks, safe crossings, and we're actually being able to stitch the neighborhood together. So you can actually cross the road, which is a huge benefit for people trying to get to the community college. We've again got the road diet and the open space that we gain from all the lane narrowing that we've done. So we're getting about 55 feet of width here, which is really tremendous. That little section of open space is represented here in this cross-sectional diagram. Again, it's about 55 feet wide. We can have a separate, separate sidewalk, open space area, the separated bike lanes, and a buffer to the street, which could potentially be bioswales or some green infrastructure. Moving north of that, we get to Essex Street and the Hood Business Park, where we're again creating 2 new signalized intersections. Similar to what I said before, that we have crosswalks and open space. And the total amount of open space from about West School Street northerly to about Baldwin Street is almost 3 acres. We're at 2 3/4 acres of open space. So tremendous benefit there. We have the ability to put maybe some more of the green infrastructure in place. We're going to be doing a Boston Water and Sewer. They have some combined sewer here, so we're separating that, which is a nice health benefit as well. And as far as the underpass goes, we are reducing the footprint of the underpass by about 800 feet in this area. So that old section of overhead structure that's still in place, that's the portal to get into the underpass. But there's a long sloped section to get down there. So we're going to be shrinking that by 800 feet. Coming up here to Sullivan Square, we are removing the rotary. And what we're showing is a street grid of regular intersections, I guess you could say. One of the things that we're doing from a traffic operations point of view is Rutherford Avenue will be continued and matched up to Martha Way. So Martha Way will become a 2-way street. A lot of the traffic on Rutherford Avenue wants to go northbound to Assembly Square to get to the I-93 ramps. So making this a straight through movement takes away a lot of the confusion, and we gain a lot of efficiency from a traffic perspective. When we plan to deck over the underpass, we create this nice open space area, which is about 1.5 acres of open space. It provides a direct connection from the neighborhood and the Schraff Center across the old rotary and to the T station. So that's one of the goals achieved right there, is better connectivity. When we do this, we're also looking to create some transit-oriented development parcels for the future. These were the parking areas that are there today, but when we shift the road over, we adjust where those are located. For the Main Street connection here to the neighborhood, we're actually cutting through a little bit of the MBTA property. So the city's been working on coordinating with the MBTA and acquiring that land. Also wanted to note here the Massport Railroad siding. Crossings will be rebuilt as a part of this work. This next image is Martha Way, which I mentioned will become a 2-way street. That helps us with some of the circulation around these new parcels. When we shift Martha Way over to align it with Rutherford Avenue, we gain a lot of pedestrian space here for biking, for sidewalk, and conveying people to Sullivan Station. So that's a huge benefit. If you know what it's like today, it's right up against this building. It's very narrow. So again, we're trying to prioritize those transit movements and getting people to transit. The 2-way separated bike path that we have here will continue all the way up into Somerville under I-93. We're lucky right now that the Mass DOT is rebuilding this Martha Way bridge, as well as the Mystic Ave bridge over the railroad track. So we're able to coordinate with them, and they're placing this pathway within the project so that we can get a direct connection to Broadway in Somerville, directly to Sullivan Station, and all the way into the downtown. There are some utility relocations that are going to be happening in this area when we shift the roadways. We need to shift the utilities so that they'll still be under the road. And that's a lot of the work that'll happen here in the construction. My next slide is Alfred Street as we head to Everett. The underpass is shown here, sort of brown. We're planning on having just 1 lane in each direction through the underpass. Today it's 2 lanes. So we're reducing that by half. Alfred Street, we're going to squeeze as close as we can to the underpass because we gained some more open space. So instead of having that open area in the middle where nobody can use it, we're pushing it to the sides. This is going to be a great benefit for any redevelopment that happens on these parcels. This space is, outdoor retail space, it's landscaping, open space, or it's cafe space on the sidewalk. So really looking to change the character here, and it's not being built by the project, but it's an opportunity in the future when that happens. In addition, when we discontinue the roadway from the old rotary, we end up with about 3/4 of an acre that we can give back to Ryan Playground. So we have the opportunity to expand Ryan Playground. We're constructing a new driveway exit onto Main Street, as well as the one that's on Alfred Street. And the Parks Department is undergoing a master plan right now for the playground. So they're going to consider this new space, as well as the connectivity to the Sullivan Square Park. So a lot of really good things happening in Sullivan Square. There's the Harbor Trail crossing that we're still thinking about from a design perspective. This is a busy area at the end of the Alfred Street Bridge and where the underpass is coming back up to the surface. So a crossing here is wanted in the future for that Harbor Trail, but we need to do it safely and we need to consider the best way to do that. So that's still under design review at this time. As Bill had mentioned, Main Street is an area that we would like to raise Main Street by about 3 feet. It turns out the railroad track, according to the Climate Ready Charlestown report, is the low point for floodwaters to enter into Charlestown. So by raising Main Street about 3 feet, we can basically almost dam that up and stop that water from coming into the town. More of that information is available in the Climate Ready Charlestown report. But what that means for us is that we have a slight impact for the fire station pad. We have to rebuild that part of that pad. A little bit of the Schrafft's driveway will need to be regraded. And then also Main Street, short sections of Bunker Hill Street and Medford Street will need to be graded to match that 3-foot elevation that we're planning. So just to try to recap a little bit for pedestrians and bicycles on all the plans that I've been showing, we're going to be rebuilding about 22,000 linear feet of sidewalk. So that's going to be great. We're making the 4 new intersections. The 4th one I forgot to mention is Mishawam Street, where we're going to put in a pedestrian crossing there. From a bicycle point of view, we're creating over 12,000 linear feet of separated bike path. 6,000 of that is 2-way, and the other is 1-way lanes. This picture here depicts hopefully the future for the corridor once we consider all the open space elements and maybe some of the plantings. But this is how it would be depicted with the road diet and the nice separated bike path that we're able to build. Looking a little bit closer at the open space and landscaping opportunities, Sullivan Square Park that I had shown you is about 1.5 acres. It's approximately the same size as the City Square Park. So we're really bookending this corridor with 2 very nice parcels of open space. There's also the Hood Business Park is making a green space on their parcel, and the Ryan Playground Master Plan is underway. So the Parks Department is looking at master planning Ryan Playground and how all these new open spaces will be connected. And as Bill had mentioned, we're basically creating 5 acres of open space on this project when we do these road diets and when we deck over the underpass. Here's a rendering of what the Sullivan Square Park could look like when the underpass is decked over. It's completely hidden. You're going to get some nice green space, hopefully some amenities, maybe some of these gazebos and whatnot, but that's all to be determined, and we'd like to hear your input on that. Here's another rendering view looking back at the Schrafft Center. At the time we did this concept, we had a bicycle roundabout. I don't think we have that on the plan anymore, but it shows you how we are elevating bike mobility with these separated lanes, as well as the pedestrian connections back to the neighborhood. So there's really some substantial expansions to the pedestrian realm. And the reason of this, of course, is the importance of Sullivan Station. From a neighborhood mobility point of view, you should be able to walk there. There's 12 different bus hubs, bus routes at this hub. There's the Orange Line. We've got ways to get into Somerville, Cambridge, and Everett, as well as Charlestown. So, we realize the importance of that, and that's why we've done the road diet and expanded that realm. Now, we're also looking to, relocate any bus stops that would get shifted when we shift the road and do the road diet. But we're also looking to future-proof this roadway. We hear a lot of talk now about maybe Silver Line extensions and things like that. We've done extensive coordination with the MBTA, and as you know, there is no bus route on Rutherford Avenue itself right now, but that doesn't mean there won't be in the future. So we're working with MBTA planning staff and City of Boston's active transportation staff to future-proof this corridor by setting aside space for future bus stops. So what we've heard so far through that coordination is potentially at City Square, up on the Gilmore Bridge near the community college, and then also at the Hood Business Park, maybe near the Baldwin Street area. From a traffic operations point of view, we've been modeling our future conditions here and the future roadway network that we've been showing you and getting good results. So the rotary is confusing and some of the lane designations are confusing. When we put in that grid of streets and when we allow Rutherford Avenue to continue northbound to Martha Way, we take out a lot of the turns in that area. And from a modeling and signal coordination point of view, we're getting good results. So the overall model, the vehicle delay for the whole network and the time travel through the network is less compared to the current condition. And the fuel usage metrics that we get from the model show that the fuel usage is less as well. So we see that as a potential benefit for air quality. This is just touching upon the Charlestown Climate Ready report that was completed. And the solution that's suggested in that report is what we're implementing. We're just suggesting if people want to read the report fully, they can go to the web link that's shown, and it's all available on the city's website. So what is the construction approach? This is a big project. We know it's going to take staged construction. It's about a 4 construction season effort. It's going to start with the major aspects first. So all the time we do underground utility relocations first. Then we get into major things like underpass renovations and decking over the underpass. Then we go into the bridge work. And then finally getting into the road reconstruction and the sidewalks and landscaping. So the staging will take advantage of the fact that we're ultimately ending up with a road diet. So that space will be used for traffic management so that we can rebuild, let's say, the southbound side first, and then eventually squeeze the road down and take up that pavement that's used for the road diet at the end. We know that construction impacts are very important for mobility for the neighborhood. So we are planning on having many more meetings into the future as the design progresses to keep you on board with what's happening and to help coordinate with the other projects in the area. So how do we keep you informed? And at this point, I'll turn it back to Alwyn Ramirez.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. How can you stay informed and how do you submit your questions or comments to us? With that in mind, we encourage you to go to the City of Boston's email shown in this slide. Please email your questions and comments to us, and we will get back to you with a thoughtful answer. Here you will find recordings and background information on the project. We will be posting frequently asked questions. Please, we encourage you to use the Sullivan Square email that's being shown in this slide. If you have any specific questions for MassDOT with regards to funding, permits, and anything else, please use the DOT dot.feedback.highway@mass. I'm sorry, let me repeat that. That's dot.feedback.highway@state.ma.us email address shown here. And now we're going to turn the presentation over for questions and answers at this point for the hearing. Before we open the hearing to general questions, I would like to provide the opportunity for elected officials to make a statement. If there are any elected officials, please let yourself be known by title, and Nate will call upon you. Nate, do you see any elected officials?
So Alvin, I'm going to read text questions tonight, and Jeff will be checking hands. So Jeff, if you see any elected officials with their hands up, please let us know. Otherwise, we can try some text questions.
Not at the moment, but please feel free either to raise your hand or put something in the Q&A, and we'll make sure to get to you guys if you do have thoughts as we continue through Q&A. Thank you.
Very good. All right. So for folks who typed in their questions, I'm going to start reading some of these, and Jeff, we'll go through a couple and slice me off when you're ready for some hands. So I have one here from Gene Wilson. This one's probably for Bill and Eric in some form or another. Question is, have you considered testing this out by blocking off 2 of the existing lanes, both directions, and seeing how traffic flows or adapts? Test before implementing, not just based on studies. 4 weeks of shutting down 2 lanes would make clear the new traffic flow.
Okay, no, we have not thought about that idea, but albeit that some of the infrastructure to do that is not really in place. That being said, the underpass in Sullivan Square today, if we close that off entirely, we would be in a really bad situation. I mean, we just don't have structurally the ability to kind of look at that and do that in some places along the corridor. Eric, do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, just regarding the Sullivan Square underpass, it's really already in the configuration that we will have it in the future because of the barriers that are in place there now. It's prior to the barriers, it's a 4-lane underpass, but it's just operating as a 2-lane. And that's what we're planning for in the future. So that's pretty close right there. But as far as the rest of it goes, it's just a little difficult with the rotary and the circle to try to, emulate that future condition. But we see that it should be more efficient. So from the Main Street perspective, you'll be able to drive straight across the circle, basically under signal control in a coordinated way. So we see in the modeling results that that's going to get better.
All right, so the next one here comes from Nathan Blanchett, and it's, could MassDOT please explain how rebuilding an auto-centric highway infrastructure, such as underpasses under Sullivan Square and Austin Street, and choosing not to build bus rapid transit facilities, advance the Commonwealth's goals of racial justice, climate change prevention, and resilience in public health, especially in a post-COVID context? I think, Bill and Eric, I know that we went over some of the bus facilities that are being put into this, the queue jump lanes, the green space, the new bicycle and pedestrian facilities. But could you expand on that just a little bit in answering that question?
Yes, we've met extensively with the MBTA, and the MBTA at this point in time did not see the need to run buses, a BRT route, a full BRT down Rutherford Avenue. Their message to us was that they wanted to get the buses as quickly to Sullivan Square Station to get on the new Orange Line cars, which would take the passengers and the public as quickly as possible downtown. So that was what was conveyed to us by the MBTA. Eric, you want to expand on that?
Yeah, and I think as we learned at the Lower Mystic Regional Working Group, that part of the solution is also getting more Orange Line tracks so that the headways could be reduced, and that the most efficient way was to push people into the city on the Orange Line. And the fact that the Sullivan Station has the bus hub that seemed like the better alternative, is what we're understanding. Now, that certainly is not a one-seat ride, specifically from Everett to downtown, but it's all the other alternatives with the 12 buses and more direct routing on the Orange Line. So, and again, we are planning for future bus stops. It wouldn't be a center running BRT. That's not achieving some of the other goals as far as the separated bike lanes and the healthy infrastructure. But if they're side running buses, we've got all the space that we want to future-proof and to add these bus stops. So I think that's the direction that we're heading, especially with that open space we're creating and the buffers. We can place the buses, the bus stops wherever we want, really. So we think that we're right-sizing the road and we're accomplishing all those goals with what we're designing.
Thanks, gentlemen. Jeff, do you have any hands for us, or do you want me to read a few more?
Nope, keep going. If anyone raises their hand, I'll let you know. I'll say, just because we skipped over this slide, as we're starting here, that raise hand icon at the bottom, if anyone is unfamiliar with it, is how you would ask to be unmuted for a verbal question. Folks can continue to submit as they are in the Q&A, but just in case anyone is new to it. And I know we have at least one person on the phone as well. So if that person wants to be unmuted, the instructions on the screen here to dial *9, and we will call them out. And as I said that, we did have a hand raised. So I'll go to that one, and then we'll continue to do text questions. But Joanne Mazzaro, I'm going to unmute you now, and please feel free to ask your question. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a question about the parcels of land that are going to be made available in Sullivan Square with the new configuration. I remember years ago when we were looking at some of this, there were 5 or 6 parcels, and now there are 2 developer ones in the larger open space park. What about the other fragments and triangular areas? When I saw your slides, they were green. Are they meant to be open space also?
Yes, Joanne, thank you for the question. What you see is the layout in Sullivan Square is part of the land disposition study that was done in 2013 by a number of different agencies that was signed on for and blessed by the former Secretary Pollock. So the 2 parcels you see, A and B, they're the development parcels. Those parcels were made in such to be the size so they could be built upon by either residential or commercial, and as well as businesses as well, retail. That being said, then we, by basically keeping the underpass in its location, it allows us to give that green space, actually the park, that green space is park space, back to Ryan Playground, which we didn't have before. That was not laid out originally. Originally, we were trying to come up on closer to Ryan Playground to come in with an intersection, but we abandoned that design so we could create that additional green space there. Eric, do you want to elaborate on the other parcels as well?
Yes, so in the disposition study, they labeled all the parcels, including they labeled Sullivan Station, they labeled some MBTA parcels. I think even the Teamsters building parcel was labeled. So, they were looking at a future for all of that space. In this case, on our show, we just labeled A and B because those are the parcels that the city has control over. I didn't label Sullivan Park. That was labeled previously as a parcel, but that's going to be a park for us. There's also the parcel next to the realigned West Street, which is really an MBTA parcel, so I didn't list that one, but that would have been the 3rd or 4th one that we could have labeled. And then I wasn't going to label Sullivan Station because that's, again, MBTA. But if you go back to the 2013 disposition study that Bill noted, all the parcels in Sullivan Square are labeled, and In this case, I only labeled the ones that would be controlled by the city of Boston. So that's why there's only 2 right now.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. So I have 3 all in a bunch from Julia Wallers. So we'll tick through them quick. I'm going to read them slightly out of order to get the shorter ones faster. So Eric, how wide are your vehicle travel lanes?
All the travel lanes will be 11 feet wide.
Okay. The next one is, I'm curious why 4 vehicle lanes are needed for the southbound direction for less than 30,000 cars per day.
So we have a short section in the southbound direction where we do have 4 lanes, but what we're doing is we're managing the 2 lanes from the surface coming out of Sullivan Square, and then the 2 lane, and what we do for the Sullivan Square underpass, it's 1 lane through the curve where the decking is at the park, but then we open that up to 2 lanes as it approaches the new traffic light at the Hood Park. That's so that we can try to reduce the queuing through the curved area for safety. So at that point, we have 4 lanes southbound. So what we do is we try to merge those back into the 3-lane section as quickly as we can, but we need to also do it safely. So those 2, the surface lane and the underpass lanes will come up through the intersection together and proceed down the next block to the Hood Industrial Park intersection. And then after that, we transition to the 3-lane section. And the 3-lane section continues south of Bunker Hill Community College, with one of those lanes peels off to the right to the Gilmore Bridge, and the other 2 lanes continue southbound towards City Square. So that was really done for a safety reason, to manage the merge and the weaving that happens as vehicles try to get over to the Gilmore. So, we tried to do that merge as quickly as possible, but we recognize that it has to be done safely.
Thank you, Eric. All right, and Julia's last one is probably one for you, Bill, so get your pencil sharp. Have you considered implementing a bus lane from the North Washington Bridge northbound to the Tobin Bridge for the 111 and other buses?
No.
I can jump in there quickly, Bill. So what we did at the Tobin intersection is we added a second left turn lane in that pocket. So now it's a dual left turn lane. And it has been brought up before that can we designate one of those as bus only? And we are going to take a look at that. I know that there's a tremendous amount of left turning traffic there. One of the peak periods, it's over 600 vehicles making a left. So it really demands 2 lanes. But we would look at, so we are adding the second lane to help out at that, for that Route 111 bus. That was something that was actually suggested to us by the MBTA bus ops folks. So we've got the lane there. It's just not dedicated for buses at this time, but we're going to analyze that. Maybe let me just expand on that a little bit, that in recent discussions with the MassDOT folks, they suggested that we widen the off-ramp from the Tobin and add that bus queue jump lane there at that right turn pocket. But that they mentioned to us that they're also considering dedicating one of the lanes on the Tobin in the inbound direction to be a bus only lane. So we still need to look at the outbound.
Thank you, Eric. Jeff, I see 2 raised hands. Do you want to fire those up now?
Yep, thank you. First up is Joanna Hines. So Joanna, I'm unmuting you, so you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay, great. Just one general question and then one more specific, but if I can ask them both before you answer, just want to run out of time. I don't know if these are timed, but anyway, when I first heard about the redevelopment of Rutherford Drive, or Avenue, I was, as everyone, it's great news and we all want the improvements. But lately, I've been hearing it referred to as Rutherford corridor. And, you know, in the past, this was actually a parkway, and there was a lot of talk, at least amongst people that I was listening to, about this being like a renewed greenway. And that was also, you know, so that was, sorry, I've got two teenagers making a lot of noise. That was also really sounded great. And with all the vacant lots around it, you know, the hope for a lot of us is that those underutilized open spaces could be places where new parks could be built alongside this greenway. So is it a corridor like Albany Street corridor, or is this going to be a parkway, a greenway? That's my first question. And then my other question was about the buses, and you may have answered this, so I'm sorry if I missed the answer. You said we're going to have plenty of space to add those bus lanes in later if we want to. Well, if we do, will that take away from the width of the sidewalks or the bike lanes or the trees?
Right. So let me start with the second one first. What I meant was we've got plenty of space to put bus stops at the side of the road, which we're planning for those now. If we can come to a consensus on where we think they should be, we won't plant anything there, or we won't put any amenities there, and we'll reserve that space for the bus stops.
But no room for a lane. So you don't have plenty of room to add a lane later. So I think that's what it sounded like.
Oh,
to
no,
me anyway.
I'm sorry. No, I mean, in the southbound direction, we will have 4 lanes for that short stretch. You know, if traffic characteristics change in the future, because there are 4 lanes, I guess there's the potential that one of those could be reassigned to a bus lane.
So there's really no chance of making this a bus lane then, without taking away sidewalk or bike lanes? I just want to be clear, because, you know,
Right.
It's comforting to hear you say in the future we'll have plenty of space, but now what I'm hearing you say is that you won't.
Yeah, you know, the lanes, when we right-sized the road, what I tried to point out, and I know there's a lot of history in the project and the studies. That's why I would re-encourage people to go back and look at all the previous studies. But the corridor does have almost 60,000 cars a day. It was like 58,500. So the regional connections that we get from I-93 at Moffaway and the northbound I-93 ramp to Cambridge Street, the Gilmar Bridge, the Tobin ramps, the I-93 ramp at City Square, you know, there's regional traffic jumping on and off the corridor. And it's pretty disruptive, and it's busy. So, but what we do see is that the benefit of keeping the underpasses is that we can keep that traffic off of the surface street. Let's say at Sullivan Square, there's 26,000 vehicles using the underpass today. If that underpass went away, all that traffic would be up at the surface, and it would be even more congested. So we see it as a benefit to keep it underneath. Then up at the surface, we can reallocate the space and the signal timings to better benefit transit and pedestrians and bikes. Mm-hmm. So likewise, you know, the underpasses are free flowing for the most part, you know, so until you start getting to the other signals.
I think to add in here, Eric, as well, is that no, we will not be taking away the public realm to create an additional bus lane in the future. No, that will not happen.
Because you're not adding a bus lane.
We would, no, if we add it, it's going to be on the existing cross section. If that comes in some point in the future, where we get confused with the word corridor and boulevard, to me, this project's going to look like a boulevard. Right now, it looks like a corridor. So
I know, but when we say corridor, it makes it sound, I mean, I think people want to hear boulevard because it gives you a sense of more pride in a neighborhood like Charlestown.
Absolutely.
And it also reminds us all that although the edges are seemingly blighted today, that they're going to be on either side of a beautiful boulevard. And so it should make us think differently about what's possible there. But when you hear corridor, you think, all right, just put anything on the edges because it's just a corridor. But when you think greenway, you might start thinking about parks on either side. At least I do.
There's a fine line here, Joanna, that right, that Federal Highways has this, is funding this project. And they get a little concerned when we use the word parks. But I totally understand what your thought process is. And yes, by all means, this is going to revitalize this corridor. We're going to create over 5 acres or about 5 acres of public realm along this corridor. So it's going to have a whole different feel, and it's going to make the neighborhood feel like a neighborhood as opposed to just a swath of asphalt down the middle, separating one side of the neighborhood from the other.
Bill, this is Jeff. Let me just jump in. I know we have about 100 people in the room and 7 raised attendees. And Johanna, you can please feel free to raise your hand again and we'll come back to you. But I want to make sure that we get to some of these other hands as well. Nate, we have about 7 hands raised. I'll do a couple more and then we'll switch back over to text questions.
Let me know when you're ready, buddy.
Sounds good. Ari, I will unmute you now, Ari Offsebit. You should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question. And I'm going to do the same thing I've been doing with others, and I'll unmute people after they ask their question. Just heads up.
All right, great. I think I've unmuted myself.
Yep, we got you.
A couple of hopefully quick questions. The first one is that it's great to see some of the bus priority that's already being put onto this. I'm Ari Offsebit from the Institute for Transportation Development Policy. We look at Audit, bus rapid transit and buses in transit in the region. It's great also to see that 600 vehicles going on the Mystic River Bridge. That means that actually probably the majority of people are on buses at rush hour, since the 111 runs something like 20 buses per hour going onto the bridge. So, looking at how to make sure the buses don't sit in traffic, since they're the majority of users on that corridor, I think is important, especially for the people in Chelsea. And that MassDOT's already designated the inbound lane for buses. Looking at the Sullivan cross section, it would be nice to see more bus lanes there. It looks like there's a bus lane going inbound from the Alfred Street Bridge to the Sullivan station, but not outbound. Right now, there's often traffic getting onto the Alfred Street Bridge in the afternoon, and buses can sit in that for 5, 10, 15 minutes going to Everett. So that impacts people going to Everett and impacts the T's operations. And then also the 92 and 93 bus going in and out of Charlestown. If those sit in traffic in and out of Sullivan, that means that the buses, when they get to Charlestown, are running late, or people who are going from Charlestown to Sullivan Square wind up sitting on the bus longer. So just making sure that the buses don't get stuck in any potential bottlenecks, and reserving sort of a clear path for transit from the Sullivan station, which is on the other side of sort of all of the action, all of the potential congestion from both the Alfred Street Bridge and sort of Bunker Hill and Main Street from Charlestown to that station would probably be very important, and would like to just see a little more red on those maps in the future.
Thank you.
We've been talking to the T a little bit too, just to expand on what Ari just said, because city's active transportation staff also asked us to look into an outbound bus lane if we could. We were trying to keep the crosswalks and the road cross section as slim as possible, but the curved section of Alfred Street that we had shown, there might be some potential there. Another thought that we had brought up before was when buses leave Sullivan Station on Beecham Street, could they ride down Beecham Street across the MBTA's parcel and potentially come out at a new intersection right at the end of the Alfred Street Bridge? They would be bypassing the intersections at Sullivan Square, and I know there is one bus stop there, but creating a more substantial intersection right at the end of the bridge would help potentially with our pedestrian crossing of the Harbor Trail, and basically creates that outbound bus lane right through the MBTA's parcel, bypassing that short section of Sullivan Square and those couple of lights there. So, that's something that as bus advocates, maybe you guys can try to bring that up if you think it's a good idea, and try to raise it with some of the other officials.
Eric, one more hand. And since you mentioned active transportation, I think maybe you might have meant BTD or the transit team specifically, but Stephanie Seskin has her hand raised next. Sorry, never mind, lowered her hand. Nate, do you want to do a couple more text questions and then we'll keep going through?
Yep, sure. I think I can plow through about 4 quick ones here. So from Joanne Liu, will there be any temporary improvements for pedestrians and bicyclists in the meantime? 2023, whenever construction is done, is a long time to wait.
That question, I haven't thought about that, but we could consider it. Everything can be considered here, so we'll take it back with the team, take it back to Public Works, and run some ideas by Public Works as well as ourselves, and then we'll get back to you.
Excellent, okay. Is there a temporary crossing currently under construction or planned between the Hood Park and Maine Charlestown?
Yes, there is. We're in the process of putting that together, a temporary crossing at Baldwin Street that will be there. I'd say somewhat in the near future. We're just in the process of blessing that design and implementing that project.
Okay. Is the cost of the decking at Sullivan Square included in the $178 million estimate?
Yes.
Okay. And then will the design be able to accommodate the micromobility trend beyond traditional bike and pedestrian use?
I'll defer to Eric on that. I know that's Dan Jaffe. Thank you. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, you know, we're creating that substantial separated bike lane all the way from City Square to Somerville, and then at the Sullivan Square Park, it splits into separate one-directional bike lanes to and from Everett. For the majority of the corridor, that's planned to be 14 feet wide. You know, we as in the transportation realm, we're always concerned about speed differentials. So if this micro transportation is slow enough to work well with bikes and peds, there's the potential for that. But some of these e-bikes and things that are more like mopeds or motorcycles, I get a little concerned about, because although I appreciate, you know, they have a much smaller footprint, it's the speed differential that we need to be concerned about, because a lot of people want to go fast once they get onto those lanes, and they're not necessarily operating at a speed that's appropriate for the people pushing the baby carriages and with the dog on the extended leash. So, you know, the space is there if it's regulated, or if this type of micro transportation is appropriate enough. I think it certainly could happen.
All right, so we have about, oh, sorry, Nate, I was going to say we have 5 hands raised at the moment, and I see some questions that are in text and also hands. So I think maybe we, you know, let people unmute and try and clear out some of that queue. First up, Jay Flynn has your hand raised. Jay, I'm unmuting you now. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Gotcha, yes, sir.
Hi, again, as you mentioned, I'm Jay Flynn. I'm bus team lead for Transit Matters. And first off, I want to say a lot good here, no question about it. So, but there are some things we are concerned about. The main one being provision on Rutherford Ave for bus lanes in the future. While the T itself may have no plans to run buses down Rutherford Ave, I know that there are many folks in the communities around there that want it. It was definitely a topic of conversation during many of the hearings regarding bus rapid transit in Everett. It's come up in discussions on potential extension of Silver Line, including extending it through to Kendall Square by way of Rutherford and going over the southern routes rather than through Washington Street. So I hope that there's more discussion between the T folks that are having the SL discussions and the folks that are talking to you, because there's 2 different tracks here going, and maybe they've already made up their mind that they're going to run it on Washington Street. Wouldn't be the first time that the public hearings were, you know, predetermined to some extent. but we really suggest that provision for buses, including potentially buses going through the underpass to avoid the Sullivan Square area, should be kept in mind.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jay.
All right, the next hand up we have is Dan Jaffe, and then I'll call on Christopher Casa after that. Oh, sorry, I clicked you guys in the wrong order. Apologies. Dan, you should be good to unmute now, and then Chris, I'll get to you in a second.
First of all, I didn't raise that question, Bill. That was,
Oh, sorry, no, I was thinking microbuses, excuse me. Sorry, Dan.
Yeah,
Sorry,
but,
go ahead, Dan.
But microbuses is something I am concerned about, and that would be to serve Charlestown so we can get to the community college as well as as well as Sullivan Square Station. So those avenues to get there are still a concern of mine, but I'm not raising that here today. Okay. The thing that I am still concerned about is that pathway along the river underneath Alfred Street. That is becoming more important now because we're going to have the community corridor opened up along the old spur line there, and we're going to have a meeting tomorrow, in fact, on the whole issue. As far as buses going down this corridor, having a bus stop, I think is just fine for those places that need it. Maybe a microbus will take advantage of those stops at some point. But that's not something that I see for the community here. As far as passing through, I think there isn't really a need for bus stops terribly much here other than at the school, at the Bunker Hill Community College. Beyond that, I don't see a stop need because we are well served by our current buses in Charlestown. But passing through is a different story, but I don't see a need to dedicate a lane for that. I think once you get what you're getting to, which is all great, by the way, I think there's no need to get a dedicated bus up from Sullivan Square down Rutherford. I think what you have now will suffice. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
All right, and Christopher, apologies for the false start there, but let me ask you to unmute yourself and you should be good.
Thank you so much. I wanted to echo the question as well. I mean, it does seem like the Silver Line extension going to East Cambridge and Kendall Square is being very, very seriously considered, and it's actually impacting a lot of project plans in Cambridge right now. So those folks who would take that will not be well served by going to Sullivan Square. Not only are the Orange Line trains over capacity, but routing Orange Line train people who want to go to Kendall with the Silver Line, which is a really important transit need right now that's very unmet from people in Everett and Chelsea. It does not make any sense to go on the Orange Line and then try and make it back to the Red Line. So I'm sure there are communications going on this, but it really would behoove this project to, have a 50-year vision about transit that could happen on the corridor. And sorry, I called it a corridor. It's, it really needs to not be a highway. So, I really think transit priority lanes throughout are very important. And the other side is I just fell into my own trap. I think it's a car highway right now, and we're building it again to be a car highway. We're not building enough transit. By keeping an underpass, we're going to ensure that the speeds are highway speeds and people aren't going to behave as they go through a new and developing neighborhood. It's going to essentially build us out for the future of noise and cars and not having transit and mode shift. So it's not going to be a pleasant place to bike and walk and cross. We're building around this future with highway speeds and throughput for cars and not building for the future. Thanks so much for your consideration and all of the hard work on the project.
Okay. Thank you, Christopher.
All right, so I had two more hands. Sorry, pardon me. Yes, two more hands that were raised when I said we'd get through this round, and then I do want to keep clearing because I see a lot of open questions still in, and we'll go back to hands after that. But Monica, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hi, I'm Monica Lamboy. I'm a resident of Charlestown, happen to work in Chelsea. I'm really glad to follow the speaker that just spoke. I do appreciate so much the sentiment with which the project is always conveyed, knitting the neighborhood back together, creating open space, multimodal. But I'd like to call out one design decision that has a substantial negative impact for a really long stretch of the project. And that happens to do with underpasses at Austin Street. By having underpasses at Austin Street, you are affecting several thousand linear feet downstream on either direction of the underpass, because you have to create additional space to go down, space to go through, and what would normally be a standard two-way intersection with a 90-degree geometry, because you've added the underpasses, it creates a complexity at that intersection that I'm not a traffic engineer, but I don't believe is needed. I think there are surface level intersections that handle the volume that we are talking about. And were we to go surface at that location in particular, the amount of width of roadway that could be saved and returned to the neighborhood side, where we have homes that are immediately abutting that. So while I hear the knitting the neighborhood back together and I hear creating the open space, I find that design decision to be particularly problematic, and especially when the transit station's on the opposite side of the street. So to have a design that still requires a pedestrian overpass suggests that something is not quite there. The balance between the walker, the biker, the resident, and the driver doesn't seem to be met at that location. So I would like to throw that out. I'd also like to throw out, so far, I think I'm the only person that goes from the 93 to the 111 and the 111 to the 93. So whenever you want to talk about that, I'm happy to talk to you guys on the side about that very difficult commute.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Monica, and thank you for support of the project over the years. I know it's been a long time. We actually rolled our sleeves up again about the Austin Street underpass as well. And I'll pass it over to Eric, and we'll explain what we looked at there and why we went back to the underpass in this location. Go ahead, Eric.
Yep, sure, Bill. Yeah, this was something that we did look at again. We know it's been a concern that you've brought up and others, including Professor Peter Firth from Northeastern wrote a couple of papers on this. So in our opinion, there's such tremendous traffic coming from Kendall Square on the Gilmore Bridge. It's about 30,000 vehicles a day on the Gilmore. If that was put at a surface intersection with Rutherford Ave, which is, you know, getting close to like 55,000 vehicles, it would create, you know, the next gigantic traffic jam intersection in the city. And that's the reason why it was grade separated in the first place, is so that we wouldn't have Rutherford Avenue subjected to the traffic coming over on the Gilmore Bridge. So, but what we've tried to do with this project is shrink that underpass at Austin Street from 6 lanes down to 3. So we're trying to take out lane capacity to try to, you know, and to some degree discourage single occupant vehicles. We're trying to right size the road and not give them excess capacity, but still needing to maintain and acknowledge these regional connections. So people coming off the Tobin, heading up and then crossing the Gilmore to get to Kendall Square. You know, there's Rutherford Avenue is the dead end for all these regional moves. Nothing crosses over continuously. So that's the hand that we're dealt. But so we did reduce the total width of the underpass at Austin Street, massively expanding the sidewalk spaces and implementing some traffic calming measures. When we met specifically with the Bunker Hill Community College senior staff, they told us that they would appreciate keeping that bridge there, that they hear from their students. They use it to get back and forth to I think it's the Whole Food Plaza down there. There is a future development building planned now right around the 99 but they are considering having a pass-through of that building. So, you know, they use both. They use the intersection and they appreciate having the bridge as well. So that's at least what we heard. The bridge is actually owned by Mass DOT. It's not a City of Boston bridge. So, you know, we're trying to replace it, make it wider, make the ramps work better, totally expand upon the sidewalk realm in those areas. And looking at the pedestrian crossing there, there's, because of the underpass, there's wide sections of sidewalk that crosses over there when it goes on top of the underpass. So from a pedestrian point of view, you're only crossing really these 2-lane ramps for the most part until you actually cross the lanes coming off of the Gilmore. So the crossings are very short and they happen with the traffic signals concurrently. So it could be, you know, it's a pretty efficient way to cross the street. If it was just one at-grade intersection, even what Professor Firth showed in his analysis, you'd need 3 or 4 lanes southbound on Rutherford Avenue with, you know, so you end up with like a 7 to 8 lane cross section instead of what we have here at Austin Street. So those were the things that we considered, and this is where we ended up. We think it's the better solution.
Thank you, Eric. So the one last hand until we move back to text questions. I also want to give the sort of 1 hour heads up, especially with the interpreters who are working very hard for us tonight. We do have a hard stop at 8:30, so I want to make sure we get through all of the questions and comments we can. So Regina, I will unmute you now. Please ask your question, and then we'll move back to some of the text questions. It looks like you unmuted yourself for a second and then remuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you now.
Okay. This is somewhat unconventional, but this is going to be my only opportunity to show you this while you're all sitting here. Can you see the road behind?
We don't have webcams up.
Let me, and my video is muted. Okay. You can hear though, the sound?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, right now, we are at probably the lowest point in the normal amount of traffic that you would ever see on Rutherford Ave. The background noise that you hear right now correlates with that. This is the quietest that it gets on Rutherford Ave. I know that when we first, you know, the last time we started talking about this, and my comments follow on the last 3. I live on Lynn Street, and what you can't see in front of you right now is what was a berm that was planted with some tall pines that was supposed to act as a bit of a barrier or a shelter from Rutherford Ave. Although it does provide a screen, it does nothing to deal with the amount of noise from the traffic. What you're hearing now is very mild because we don't have a traffic jam. We don't have horns honking. And we have very low number of trucks at this time of day, okay? But the truck traffic, well, here's a truck coming now, but the truck traffic with their brakes and their air horns when there is a traffic jam rises to a crescendo, which is basically almost impossible to tolerate. You know, it became more obvious when we all started working from home, but it was obvious for a long time. The amount of truck traffic here has increased and increased and increased. We get exiting sand trucks from Boston Sand and Gravel. We get all of the trucks exiting the Tobin Bridge, and then we get the trucks that are entering here. And it really has become basically almost a nightmarish scenario where I can't live in my house anymore very comfortably. I can't open my windows during most of the day. I can't listen to the television with the doors open without having to close them. And not only that, everything in my house after, a few hours of opening the windows is covered with a black greasy grit. You folks promised to do an air and sound quality study for us. I'm all for transit-centered housing, but you can't build up against these roads houses that are going to be hospitable for anybody to live in unless they keep their windows closed 24/7. And that's one of my biggest points here. Is I know that there's no place for you to put the traffic. Where is the traffic going to go? Where can you put that truck traffic? And you've done a lot of great work to expand the streets and things. You're talking about taking down this berm here. Then we would be flat and level with the street. It only takes one pothole hit by a car carrier. The car carriers go flying through here now and they hit those potholes and it sounds like a bomb goes off. The only way I can make you appreciate it is to invite you into my backyard here. I'm going to stop because I think I've made my point, but I really please ask you to do some more environmental studies here because you're thinking of building more housing in Sullivan Square up against this road. Who wants to live in these places? We're creating a city that is not particularly hospitable to live in. That's it, I'm sorry.
So just to add a comment to what you just said, Regina. So one thing that we're doing that hopefully would benefit you is when we do the road diet, we are gaining the space where we're putting that shared use path, but there's also room for landscaping along the whole stretch of the road. So what we're hopeful for is to be able to put some trees or something eventually there as to help with the buffer and to help with the noise or the screening. But in regard to that connection that I'm suggesting to Lynn Street, we would only look for an area that makes sense, and we can appreciate that you have the berm in front of your house. So, if we get comments on that connection, we can look at it some more. But for now, it's just a thought to try to increase mobility, but we wouldn't want to cause any harm as well.
All right, so Jeff has requested that I come in with some of the text questions. You guys may not have thought about this. This seems like the kind of thing that you would get to, but I'll toss this to Eric and Bill. I think this person is making this statement. I don't know if it's true because I didn't get a close look myself, but there are no parking spaces or pull-off areas for Uber for the new redevelopment parcels in Sullivan, nor for the existing businesses along Rutherford Avenue. The idea is to create a new neighborhood rather than just a cut through. We need to serve local businesses that have their retail entrances on Rutherford. Please reconsider by shifting the alignment.
Right. Thank you for the comment. The layout of Sullivan Square right now as it stands is a grid system. We have not looked at the curbside use particularly in there. As we roll our sleeves up and start to fine tune things will get a lot more clearer. Right now, we're only at 25% design. As we start to go forward with the design, those questions like that will become a lot clearer. There was internal talk about which side of the street would be more publicly friendlier, I would say. Like, was it gonna be Main Street, Marfa Way, which side of the retail? Some of these questions were thrown out by our colleagues at the BPDA as well. And in past meetings, I believe we probably heard the same questions before. So that's to be determined as we move forward. So not forgotten, but will be determined in the future.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks.
All right, and Eric, this might require you to do some math. So if it does and you don't have it off the top of your head, I'll flip down to the next one where you bring up the answer. But this is from Tom Lamar. For somebody walking to Sullivan Station from Charlestown, how many total car lanes would they have to cross across all the intersections?
I'd have to look at the plan again, but one thing I wanted to, this brings up a good point that I didn't make when I was going over that section of the plan. So I'll bring it back up now. So I've got that on the screen here. And one thing that's nice about what we're doing is the way that we've reconfigured the grid with the underpass in place is this crossing here from the neighborhood would be concurrent when Rutherford northbound and Moffat Way southbound are operating. And there should be really lower right turn volumes from Rutherford Avenue because you would be using the underpass. So we're expecting a light turn here. So this crossing becomes very safe. And then likewise, when you get to the other side of the street, there's no left turn from Cambridge Street at the first intersection because you could make the turn onto Beecham. There is an opportunity to make a turn on Main Street, but with the no left turn here, this crossing is also totally protected when the east-west movement is going. So the layout of the streets and creating Rutherford Ave as a matchup to Maffa really makes a good crossing location to get to the station. So we did eliminate the right turn pocket that's on Maffa Way today and narrowed up the road and again created a nice pedestrian realm. So we think we're really boosting that space, but certainly there still is a lot of lanes. There's on one of the slideshows we did previously, we looked at all the 5 different streets coming into Sullivan Square and the underpass, and there's over 100,000 vehicles entering Sullivan Square on a daily basis. So it's certainly a challenge, but we think that we're providing a good crossing environment here.
All right, excellent. Should we do one more, Jeff, and then we'll grab some hands?
I would keep pushing through. I think I see a lot of people with hands up and text questions, so I want to make sure that we get some of those down.
Anonymous attendee, who will be maintaining the new Sullivan Square Park and green infrastructure in the future?
Okay, so that the maintenance of the green space or the greenway, public realm, whatever we prefer to call it, that's going to be an ongoing discussion that's going to be a public-private partnership with other developments that are scheduled to come online in this area. The city, we hope that we can replicate something that happened at Post Office Square here downtown, where we engage in a public-private partnership with certain entities to take care of this green space. We know that we don't have the capabilities ourselves, the city, to maintain it, but those are ongoing discussions as we speak internally. So with the Parks Department, so we're aware of that, but we're doing everything in our earnest, and I want to stress this, to create the public realm that the public really wants, that the residents of Charlestown and the other individuals on this call want to see. I'm all about creating the best possible public space we can provide, as long as we can maintain it. So we have that question. We're working on it, and it's something in the works. Thank you.
All right, excellent. I'm going to give the next one from Noreen Manning. Has any consideration been given to the rundown fence on the northbound side directly across from the front door of Hood? It is owned by the BPDA. The 26 townhouses that sit behind the fence are negatively affected by the air and the noise pollution. And I think, Eric, you already spoke effectively about how with some of the road dieting, we'll be able to enhance the green space and give people more of a buffer between themselves and the road. Bill, anything particularly on that fence, seeing as that you're here wearing your city hat?
Right, that was owned by the BPDA. I don't know if it's actually taken place, but it's going to be given back to the city of Boston, back to Public Works. I think the question also is, can we do something with it, maybe as an interim part prior to the construction of the project? That's something I'll speak to Public Works about, see if we can do that. I know there was some minor repairs that were done to the fence. In the future, that's the green space that comes along that. We did hear from residents that they still wanted to have that separation there, but that I'll kick that to future meetings as we go forward here on what type of barrier or fence we want to see there. There was a lot of talk, I believe, with the Mishawam residents back in the day about young children or others getting outside or getting into the car without supervision. So as we progress along with other meetings, that's something we will get involved with. Thank you.
So Bill, apropos of the earlier comments, there was the young children getting into the boulevard without.
Boulevard, correct, yes. Boulevard.
Good, all right. So this one is from Tom Lamar. And I think, Eric, you spoke to this a little bit, that, the underpasses are being skinnied up a bit, so they're not going to take all the real estate that they do today. But the question is, how much width does the underpass take up? How much more green space could we create without the underpass taking up space?
Yeah, if we're talking about the Sullivan Square underpass.
Doesn't say which one, but it just says underpass.
Yep, I'm going to go with that one first, and then I'll go to the other one. So Sullivan Square underpass is, according to today's highway standards, it's slightly deficient because of the curvature there. It doesn't meet sight lines. So when you're heading northbound, there's a sight distance issue. If it was operating in the 4 lanes that it is today, you wouldn't see somebody if they were broken down in the right lane if you were heading northbound. So that's one of the reasons why we're going to be reducing it to just 2 lanes, but we're also keeping breakdown lanes in there to meet current standards and for sight lines. So we're not making any reduction in the width at Sullivan Square, but at Austin Street, we are reducing the width pretty significantly. Like I said, from the 6 lanes down to the 3. But again, the current roadway, if you drive it, does not meet design standards because there's no shoulder area, so there's no sight distance around the corner, again, when you're heading northbound. So that's an existing deficiency that we want to correct. So even though we're going to have 1 lane in the northbound direction, we're still proposing to have an 8-foot shoulder for sight distance to see around the curve. So the 6 lanes down to 3, but 3 lanes, but with adequate shoulders for safety, for breakdowns. Also for Austin Street in the northbound direction. So, Rutherford Avenue wears a lot of hats. It is a boulevard, but it is also a designated hazardous materials route. It's also it's on the National Highway System as a designated road. So we have to maintain those federal highway standards. And so we're reducing that as much as we can and, gaining that substantial green space for the bike path on the neighborhood side. So we think we're doing some good things there.
All right, so I have one here from Aaron Grainer, and he starts off with the positive. I love the approach you've taken here. That part's good. Says, however, what I can't seem to understand is why you're still including 2 underpasses. It completely misses the redesign of the road, keeps it looking more like a highway, higher speeds, etc. Removing them would reduce costs and make it more people friendly. I think, you gentlemen have spoken effectively about why the overpasses or underpasses rather are still present. It does go to some of the regional aspects, trying to pull some of that through traffic away from neighborhood and not process it on neighborhood streets. And just, try to acknowledge the fact that there is a regional context here. Is there anything more that you'd want to add to kind of what I just recycled back to you?
No, that's about the best summary you could put. The only thing I would add is, once again, we've looked at this corridor countless times, and what we see here and what we're showing the public today is really, we've really fine-tuned this really down to the narrow edge. The narrow edge being said through the Federal Highway Administration. Anything that we would do to create either, I should say, a roadway diet, even what we're showing, more severe, the Federal Highway Administration would walk away from this project. That being said, $175 million would disappear. So I want to make that clear. I think Rep. Ryan made that clear at the beginning. This project is at a threshold. It's its last breath, so to speak, that the residents of Charlestown want to see a project built. And we've done everything possible to hear from the community as far as the underpass, no underpass, back and forth. But I just want to make it clear, we really, really did the best we could here to fine tune this roadway. So I want people to understand that also, because it is a regional corridor and it is considered a part of the highway system by Federal Highway. Thank you.
So actually, Bill, that makes a beautiful segue to Ryan Gavin's question. And just for the sake of speed, I'm going to paraphrase it.
Yeah.
So we talked about advertising this construction in 2023, and he remarks the fact that the timetable on this job has moved a few times. But is 2023 real? And will there be regular public updates on the project as it advances?
Yes, 2023 is real. Our project, our schedule right now is really critical. It's on a critical path here. This project, this hearing out, as I conveyed earlier, we're at 25% design. After this hearing, this will allow us to ramp up to get to 75 to 100% design, albeit that's not just in some back room here at City Hall. That's with the input of you, the public, that's here today, as well as others. And if we do not make the current schedule that we've laid out here in the year 2023, the MPO, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization in Boston, my colleagues, this funding will disappear from that, and it will not be pushed to 2024. It won't be pushed to 2025. This money will be allotted for some other municipality, as Rep. Ryan conveyed, and this money could go to some other project, say Norwood, some other municipality that needs this money as well. So I want to stress that all the agencies that I thanked at the beginning, they all want Charlestown to have this project and this project built in Charlestown.
Excellent. All right. So the next is from Dan Jaffe. And Eric, I think this one's for you. He says, does it make sense to add a full intersection at the Bunker Hill Community College parking lot?
So one of the strategies that we're employing, with this road diet and with creating these new intersections is, sorry, did you say creating a new intersection where?
At the Bunker Hill Community Parking Lot.
Okay, to the south. So that would be challenging because of how close it is to the Tobin ramps. That's the main reason why we left that U-turn in place at the Austin Street Bridge, because it specifically serves that parking lot and the Boston Sand and Gravel operation that I think Monica mentioned or somebody mentioned. That's a challenging spot in itself. So that doesn't work with the plan that we have, where we're keeping the grade separation at Austin Street. Because of the ramps coming down, it'd be very difficult to integrate that into an at-grade intersection. Just in general, to touch upon one of the other comments, having the grade separation helps with safety. We're reducing the amount of potential conflicts that could happen. So at major crossings like the Gilmore Bridge with Rutherford Avenue, a grade separation is is one of those countermeasures that most communities don't get to do because of how expensive it is to implement a grade crossing, a grade separation. But we've already got them here at Sullivan Square as well. So these are tremendous countermeasures for safety. And we're trying to make the most of them, keep them in place, but squeeze them down as much as we can.
All right, excellent. I have one here from Jay Flynn, and it seems like it might be a little bit cut off. However, it says, on Rutherford itself, Everett seems quite keen on one seat to Haymarket, and this does not seem to take that into account. Without knowing the full question, it seems to me that we've covered some of this, which is there have been conversations with the MBTA, and the MBTA's desire seems to be to chiefly tie buses to Sullivan Square Station and get people onto the Orange Line. Would you want to add anything to that, Eric or Bill?
No, that's correct. Thank you, Nate.
All right.
Yep, and sorry, Bill, I got to add one more thing
Right.
because it was on one of my slides, but I didn't mention it. So what we hope to implement when we replace all the traffic signals is to add a feature, well, two things, potentially adaptive traffic control, which I believe is being tested in the Seaport right now with a MassDOT and City of Boston project for adaptive control, but also to include the feature called Transit Signal Priority, TSP. So, you know, the overall benefit for riders from Everett, let's say if there was a bus on Rutherford Avenue, is first of all, we've got the grade separation with the underpass. But if the MBTA buses had transit signal priority and the City of Boston implemented that, they no longer work on like a line of sight beacon. They can work on GPS. So when the buses from Everett come over the bridge, they could start to tell the signals at the Hood Business Park and Bunker Hill Community College that a bus is on the way. And the signal will rest in green and wait for that bus to pass. That's how transit signal priority works. So we're hoping to implement that feature, and it's going to have to work in cooperation with you know, Boston Traffic and the MBTA for them to implement that on their buses. But that's a good workaround, I guess, to having full dedicated lanes. Is, you know, you're not using the dedicated lanes all the time, but the signal priority can take control and get the green light when they need it. So
Eric,
I just wanted to mention that.
Eric, I want to go back to a couple hands are raised and just noting that it is 7:55, so time is kind of flying past us here. And hopefully that gives Nate a chance to scroll through the open questions too and group them together and make sure we're answering as many as we can. So Julia, I know you asked a couple of text questions as well, but if any weren't answered and we can get those checked off as well, please feel free to unmute yourself. And then Douglas will come to you after Julia's question.
Sure, thank you. I know we're running low on time. I'll be really quick here, and thanks for answering my text questions earlier. So Julia Willers with ITDP. Thanks for including all of the details about bus lanes and do not preclude for BRT. I think all of that has been covered pretty well in this meeting, so I don't need to read any of that. I'm really glad to see the reduction in lane width to 11 feet. If those lane widths were narrowed further to 10-foot lanes, I would think it would not only slow traffic, but would make it possible to make room for bus lanes without impacting any of the green space or any of the existing proposals for a protected bikeway. And I just wanted to clarify that and put that out there. But ultimately, I think what I'm confused on here is one of the comments that was just made. It's really hard to stomach that we're spending almost $200 million to rebuild a highway. And I know you have some legitimate reasons for why you feel that the underpasses are necessary. And we do believe that, you know, bus lanes and BRT is possible for that to happen. But as we're coming out of this global pandemic, and we've seen more than ever how important transit is to our economy, to safety, how enthusiastic communities have become about carving out space for biking and walking and outdoor dining, and how pressing the threats of climate change are continue to be, it just doesn't sit well that we're spending so much money to rebuild a below grade highway in light of all the money that all of our state goals about, you know, moving away from auto-centric development, moving more people in fewer vehicles. And now we have this new federal administration that is fervently supporting transit and people-centered design and, you know, explicitly working to right the wrongs of the past. with roads like this that divide communities, you know, to get rid of these highways and to stitch them back together. Something about it just, it doesn't sit well that we would be taking this next step to put this into our urban fabric for the next, you know, 50 plus years. And the traffic numbers also don't warrant it. So I'm confused when you said that if we get rid of the underpasses, we might lose the federal money. They would somehow take that back. I would like to know a little bit more about that, and that we would, you know, have to reallocate it. I think we could move 50,000 cars a day at an outgrade boulevard while also having room for BRT, bike lanes, sidewalks, greenways, and facilitating the future that we want and the kind of development that's quite frankly being marketed right now on that corridor. So thank you for, you know, working with us and listening to us and considering our comments and concerns for the last year. I don't want to glaze over that this is a massive improvement and you've done a ton of work and we all want to see this happen. So thank you very much for all of that.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you.
So the next hand is Emma, and then Tara, and those are the two that I have up now. So we'll go back to text questions after those. Emma, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hi, Emma Yashar. I live on Union Street in Charlestown, which is right, almost right behind the Austin Street intersection. And I wanted to follow up on a question and a few comments about that intersection. The first is, I'm not sure I heard an answer to how much reduction in physical space is happening with this design versus what's there right now.
Do you mean physical spaces in asphalt or?
No, so the previous question about how much physical space is being occupied by keeping the underpasses in the design that could be used for green space or other purposes if it was an at-grade solution. I heard the answer for Sullivan Square, which is that it's remaining the same. And I heard a talk of lanes and that sort of thing at Austin Street, but the actual space that's available, I don't think I heard the answer to that.
So the overall width of the Austin Street underpass is 84 feet today, and the proposed width is 61 feet. So we're making about a 23-foot reduction. But you have to consider that because it's grade separated, we can have fewer lanes in there because they're operating, you know, they're flowing through. If it became a surface intersection, you would need all those lanes back because they would be stopped at the traffic light. So in some of the studies that were done previously, and I know that we spoke to you at some of the public meetings, we could go back and look at some of the old concepts and documents that looked at the surface option versus the underpass option and how much room we could get. We think we've made an improvement based on the looking back at those prior designs, in that we're gaining a significant amount of space with the road diet up and down the whole corridor. And one thing that's noteworthy at Austin Street, and we've brought this up at prior meetings as well, is that the right-of-way width there is just narrower than at the rest of the corridor. I don't know why, but maybe it's because Lynn Street is there and some of the houses are there, but the right-of-way is just not as wide as it is on other sections of the corridor. So we don't have as much space there as we do everywhere else. So those are some of the reasons why we can only do as much as we can there.
Thanks, Eric. Tara, I'm unmuting you now. You should be able to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hi, I did actually put mine in the chat when you said you were switching to chats, but
oh, apologies.
Yeah, no worries. But the speaker right before Emma, she kind of covered my sentiments a little bit, although my chat question was more specific. But I am on the IAG for the 201 Rutherford Avenue. I'm also on the neighborhood council, resident of Charlestown. And just sitting on this IAG and listening to developers and the requirements that, you know, the parking is that developers are required to put in is just drastically reduced because We're supposed to be dependent on transit. We're at a transit hub. We're biking, we're walking. And actually those things are true. We are doing that. I wouldn't say people are going to get rid of their cars at the rate people think they are. But if that's the one side of the way the city is approaching development, again, back to 2 speakers ago, why are we not using that same philosophy when developing this? And I will say, based on, I've been going to these things for 10 years, and I will say we've made great strides in this design, but it's still under this philosophy that we need this highway system, and yet all of the other development follows a different philosophy.
Thank you, Tara, and thank you for your service on the IAG as well. Yes, the developers all have this plan as well, or the future developers have this plan that we're showing you tonight. As far as the traffic ratios that they're presented with, some of the ratios go as low as 0.5, some go to 0.30. There's others that go lower than that. At one point in time, there's always a 1-to-1 ratio. That being said, and this is a statement that I always use, and I always use it as I go around the city to other projects, Article 80 projects. Every project is unique also. Every project is unique in itself, and how much parking and how much storage every unit needs. But that being said, this also is a corridor. I mean, we're creating a boulevard, but it's actually part of the interstate highway system. This services Route 99, other aspects, Cambridge, out the northbound, out to Medford, all the way up to, up to the New Hampshire border, people jumping off of I-93. It's a huge, we're taking it, and by creating a roadway diet, we hope to discourage people from coming down Rutherford Avenue, but still, it's still a main corridor. It's still a heavy used corridor. But as Eric has said, and I've said before, we're doing everything in our ability to take all those modes of transportation into consideration. These developments, they come in with X amount of parking, but you're going to remember, and I tell this to everyone, the majority of people that come in and rent a unit that costs $5,000 a month or plus, most of those people in those units have cars. They may not drive those cars each and every day, but they have a car. So, and we experience that out in Alston, Brighton as well. I know I'm going a little off track here, but a lot of those people do not drive during the week. The majority of those people, I'd say they take an Uber, and Uber picks them up and drives them to either the T station or to wherever they're going. There's been studies on that as well. I know there's some critics out there now that on the call that they'll say, well, let's look at the studies. But that being said, that's just this quick snapshot. But I understand what you're getting at. And as I said, each project is unique, but we're willing to work with everyone on this as we go forward. Thank you.
Right. Doug, I know I've said your name a couple times, and I think you lowered your hand and then re-raised it. So I want to unmute you and let you ask your question if you have one for now, and then we'll go back to text questions after that. And Doug, if you're having trouble figuring out the controls, feel free to put a question in the Q&A and we'll answer it via text as well. But all right, Nate, why don't we go back to text questions, and I'll see if I can help Douglas out.
Certainly, sir, no problem. So this one comes from Joanne Lou. Bill, I think this one might be one for you in terms of the potential short-term improvements. Joanne asks, are there any improvements for the Spice Street intersection? Currently, a pedestrian light has been destroyed and unreplaced for 3 months now. Cars often block that intersection, and bikes can't trigger the light at Spice.
Thank you, Joanne. I'll make sure I take a look at it tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay. Gene Wilson says, please put back the turnaround lane southbound on Rutherford. It benefits Charlestown people. I assume U-turns and right turns off of Rutherford into Charlestown will be verboten. I think that's an Eric question.
Sorry, let me get my camera back on. So you could still make a U-turn using the Austin Street intersection, but that slip lane that's in place is some of the highway-esque type, highway character that we're trying to remove. And by creating those 3 intersections at Bunker Hill up to the Hood Park, and then the other one at Mishawum, making those into full access there, that was some of the reasoning why we wanted to remove that as well. So it's all part of trying to change the character of the street as much as we can, and that was one of the elements that we felt could be eliminated, and then you still have the ability to make the U-turn by just going through the traffic signal at Austin Street.
All right, so I have one that I think is relatively painless here. Alexander E. Frieden writes, the Sullivan Square Rotary today has the name of the meat grind. Ooh. How are we through this project? Nope. How through this project are we making Sullivan Square Rotary a safer space to walk and bike for persons 8 through 80? And I think the short, simple answer is you're abolishing the Rotary and turning it into a conventional intersection. Is that correct, Eric and Bill?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
All right. So moving ahead, I have one from Regina Ashodian. Could you explain how the numbers for truck traffic were calculated? Were they collected over 24 hours, 7 days per week?
Yes, when we take traffic counts, we often collect a full week worth of data. And then depending on what time of year it's collected, we also use the state's full database in order to come up with some seasonal adjustment factors as needed to normalize that data. So the trucks have been counted several times. We have data that goes back to the 2008 studies, again in I think 2012, 2015, 2017, and 2019. So we think we have a pretty good handle on trucks, but there's also a good report that was written, I think by the CTPS. It was for the Rutherford Avenue corridor, a truck study that was done by Bill Kuttner. So I would suggest you take a look at that. You know, that's one of the things, we call it a boulevard, and we're adding those elements. But we also have to remember Rutherford Avenue is the evacuation route for the city of Boston, and it is the designated hazardous materials route. So there's always going to be some element of trucking on the corridor. You know, if you cross over to Everett, you'll see the heavy industrial that's there. And, you know, what's interesting about Charlestown is it is hemmed in a little bit by the I-93 highway and the railroad. So streets like Cambridge Street and Route 99 and the Gilmore Bridge and the North Washington Street bridges are the only ways around those physical barriers. So traffic ends up being a little more concentrated at those locations compared to if we could build another roadway through the community college back end and connect up to Kendall Square. So the railroad, the highway, the Mystic River, it makes it a big challenge to handle traffic and to route traffic, you know, the ways that we want, because we have to maintain those physical connections.
Great, thank you, Eric. So I have one here from Brian Callahan. Does this project include any improvements to Cambridge Street?
We are going to be retiming the signals on Cambridge Street to work with the new signals that we put in Sullivan Square. But for the most part, we're not planning to do any roadway widening at Cambridge Street. We did have a request from the Mass DOT to look at putting some queue detectors on the I-93 northbound off-ramp to Cambridge Street because of the backups onto the highway. They are looking to have us implement some. They're basically like emergency detectors. When the queue gets too far and there's a danger of backing up onto I-93, it would trigger the light to release the ramp. But we have some strategies to keep traffic moving on Cambridge Street, but no real road work to speak of.
Okay, just to add to that, thank you, Brian, for the comment. as a separate project than this, which we committed to the residents of that area of Charlestown to do improvements. Along with those improvements over there in that neighborhood, we're going to be running some interconnect and fiber that connects the signals with Sullivan Square to help facilitate the flow of traffic along that area of Candace Street.
Well, let me just jump in here for a second. As timekeeper, again, acknowledging that we are past 8 o'clock. I know I want to make sure we're respecting people's time, and we'll keep going through questions here. But since the meeting was noticed 6 to 8, I just want to give folks who do want to hop off another reminder of the comment emails. Eric, could you go back to the slide showing the Sullivan Square email? Yeah, so just if folks do need to leave, I know we're getting past dinner hour at this point. Please email your thoughts, questions, comments about the meeting to that address there, Sullivan Square, Sullivan SQ @boston.gov. And just one more reminder, when this webinar does end, and via email when it does go out to you after the webinar ends, there will be a quick survey to go as well, another way to offer comments. So we'll get back to text questions now. I just wanted to make sure that if anyone was feeling trapped because they hadn't seen that email address in a minute and needed to remember, that will be open. The presentation recording will be posted on the City of Boston's website, and we'll have those available to you as well.
Jeff, can you also show the MassDOT email address as well? Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Alwyn. Yep. So that's the same one there. If there are, as Alwyn said at the beginning, any funding, permitting, state agency specific questions, dot.feedback.highway@state.ma.us. Thanks, Nate. Sorry to interrupt there.
Jeff, and I think the recording of this, is that going to go up on the city's website?
Correct. Yep.
Thank you very much for that, Jeff. That's good thing to mention at this time. So we have one here from an anonymous attendee. And I think we just talked a little bit about how the trucks were accounted for and the counts that drive the models that have been used. But can you talk a little bit more about how this plan is going to account for the heavy trucks that use both Main Street to Medford Street and Rutherford Avenue and Austin Street to get back to the Charlestown terminals? The modeling references a small portion of truck volume in the traffic stats, but it seems like it's downplaying their impact in this area.
Yeah, we understand that, Chelsea Street and leading back to the port is always pretty much congested. It's a busy area. It's one of the only few ways to get out of Charlestown, and then it hosts that big port area to boot. So Medford Street, we don't have any plans for alterations there. I think the benefit that we're looking at up in the Sullivan Square end for Medford Street is just that when it comes into Main Street, we're putting a signal at Main Street that's going to go directly across the rotary and connect to Mystic Avenue directly. That's going to help with the routing to get to I-93 northbound. And the way that we're operating Rutherford Avenue northbound to Moffat Way is also going to help with the efficiencies in Sullivan Square. So we think we're helping out that end of the project as much as we can. The southern end of the project at City Square, where we match into the work done by the North Washington Street Bridge, there's not a lot of improvements that we're making there, except for really the road diet and starting the bike facilities at that point. But we certainly will be collecting the new traffic counts and trying to make the signals operate as efficiently as they can and to be constructed by the project.
Great. Thank you, Eric. This one is from William Devlin. I think this is referring to the construction period. And my guess would be, Bill, that this will be sorted out as you get a contractor on board, since you can't typically limit means and materials. But William asks, will this work generally happen during the day or overnight?
That'll be determined as we get further into the design. And then get on board, then it goes out to advertisement, gets on board with the contractor. All the construction management plans will be reviewed as well. Obviously, we have nighttime restrictions with noise also in this area as well. So all those things will be looked at. And once again, those meetings will be open to the public as well. We're going to try to mirror that somewhat. In my mind, is this is such a large project. It's one of the largest projects undertaken since the Big Dig. So with my experience on that and all the construction management back in the day, I just see this thing as being an ongoing, conversation with the residents of Charlestown and making sure that their voices are heard throughout the construction, and making sure the contractor is held to the means and methods to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bill. I think this next question kind of goes to something that you gentlemen have been talking about all night, which is the idea of trying to balance this corridor so that it can perform all the roles that it has to perform, from new boulevard to member of the federal highway system. But Ed, just capital E, capital D, asks, there seems to be a lot of infrastructure changes for bike lanes and road diets. How does bike lane demand compare to car lane demand for Charlestown residents coming and going out of
I can answer that. When I was looking back at some of the prior studies and some of the data that we collected initially when we started the project, I stumbled upon some data from a 2013 ACS survey, American Community Survey, so associated with the Census Department, supplemental surveys that they do. So it was interesting to see and refresh my memory that the mode split in Charlestown was about 47% single occupant vehicle, but then the walking, the transit, and bicycle combined were also 47% of the mode split, and the other 6% were just other. So, when you consider that and some of the comments other people have made, when you think about how many people can sit on a bus and take up less space, it makes sense that we would try to reallocate some of this corridor to those other modes that make up 50% of the rideshare. So, this is sort of a typical 1950s corridor that we see all over the country. That was always very auto-centric. That was new back then. That's what they wanted. And now we're trying to reimagine these spaces to work for what we need. But, we, as Bill mentioned, we're still having to have these regional connections, these hazardous materials routes, these evacuation routes. But I think that with the road diet, we're creating a project that maintains all those necessary uses, but also gains a lot of that space back as open space, as space for non-motorized users to actually have healthy commute options from close communities like Everett. Even if it does end up being on a e-assist bike or something like that. So we're providing a lot of options on this corridor. And we think it's a tremendous project. We hope it continues to go through.
Thanks, Eric. All right, so I have one here from an anonymous attendee that is more a comment than anything else. Not knowing exactly where the city line is. This could be a Bill comment, this could be an Alwyn comment, or it might be a comment for a municipality not represented tonight. But it said, would it be possible to paint some lanes between Sullivan Circle and Home Depot before finishing up construction in June 2027? All joking aside, it's a free-for-all through that section, and it would be great to have some markers to guide drivers through there. ASAP, MassDOT.
I think that might fall into the city of Somerville in that area.
Okay.
I think
we can take a look at that. That might be present day condition as well, because the circle itself was confusing as well going around and I know that with Encore and others, we put some additional striping out there. So that's something we could probably take a look at now.
Okay. Please provide your comments in writing and we appreciate it.
Right.
We can look at that. Thank you.
So we have another one here from Charlie Dennison. He says, can you please add crosswalks to all legs of all intersections, particularly around Sullivan Square? Currently, and in plans shown, there are some missing, which creates indirect and long routes time-wise due to waiting for signals to legally cross. Especially with the new developments planned, it will be very important for people to be able to access the T station easily and directly.
Yep, we are reviewing that, and we're always trying to balance safety with operations. So in some cases, we understand the request for full, complete access, and that's what we're striving for. There's some areas where we might not feel comfortable operating a concurrent crosswalk because of the angle of the street or the speed that we think the vehicles are going to make on the turns. But your comment is well noted. It's been brought up by the agencies as well. So we are continuing to look at that as we advance the design.
Okay, great. Next one is from an anonymous attendee. And this one I think is kind of an Eric one, so get ready, buddy. So in planning the revised car traffic routes and roadway widths, have you identified the likely greatly increased traffic which will be generated for every planned or recently approved housing project in Charlestown, e.g. One Charlestown? That's part one. I think the answer is yes, because you guys work with BPDA and you factor in what they anticipate for traffic coming from their new permitted developments.
Correct.
Thank you, Bill. So the answer to part one is yes.
Yes.
Part two is, what is the maximum number of cars that can travel on your revised traffic diet roadway? And it is an increase or decrease from the present level. I believe that the housing projects in current development in Charlestown alone, coupled with the rapid gentrification of the neighborhood, will effectively double the number of two-car families.
So when we do our traffic studies, in this case, we were lucky to have the Lower Mystic Regional Working Group activated because of the casino project. So that was a MassDOT, City of Somerville, City of Everett effort, led by MassDOT with the Central Transportation Planning staff and the MAPC, Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. So those two agencies did a lot of the future traffic volume projections for us, and they work closely with the communities in the Lower Mystic area to plan out the future development. So our project is working off of a 20-year projection. So we've included a lot of those developments if they were known at the time. If they're new developments, they would probably likely be absorbed in the general growth rate that we also included in the numbers. But as they continue to come online and as we collect these new traffic counts, we're always going to keep assessing that. We want the contractor to build and implement the timing that's the best for the time that it gets built. So, on a traffic signal world, it's sort of a moving target. We always want to provide the best. We don't want to provide signal timings based on 2017 data, for example. So it's something that we're always looking for.
Just come in too to say it's 8:25. I just heard the sunset cannons go off. So this is a 5-minute warning. And again, if there are any questions that we can't get to by now, as Alwyn said, frequently asked questions will be posted on the website. So if you have a question that we haven't gotten to yet, our apologies. We'll get through as many as we can in the last 5 minutes here, and we'll make sure to answer them all as we go.
And Jeff, I have closing comments too. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Alwyn.
At this point, folks, if you've had a shot in just going to let you know, full disclosure, if you've had a shot already, either in text or on the hand raised, I'm going to try to get to people who haven't had any opportunity yet. So Alex Cox from Walk Boston. Alex says a lot of good things about the project. There's the lingering concern about the underpasses. We've discussed, I think, at length why the underpasses are present. There are sort of two questions about the underpasses. Are they going to be more expensive to maintain than a purely surface option? And do you have concerns over them flooding?
So, yep, we can get at that. So I see the big benefit of maintaining the underpasses because it keeps that 26,000 vehicles a day out of Sullivan Square and underneath. That's why we want to deck over it and make it better for the surface condition, and that we're also able to reallocate the signals and make them work more efficiently when we don't have to take into account that extra 26,000 vehicles. So, you know, the underpass itself, it's all concrete. It's going to be, the decking will be concrete precast units. It's very low maintenance. They actually, we're going to make an improvement to the underpass when we deck over it. We need to build new walls inside up against the old walls. So the new walls are going to add even more structural capacity to the underpass, but also help with some of the leaking that's occurring through the walls themselves. But you know, we've got that resiliency component to the project. If you take some time to look at the climate ready reports, you can see that the flooding comes in through the railroad and then it spills through Charlestown. It's not coming from the river into the underpass itself. So we think we're handling that solution, solving that problem, and that the underpass in general is pretty low maintenance because it's like 100% concrete. So we're striving for a long service life.
Great. Okay, so this next one is from Taylor Beasley. And I think I can take a quick shot at this because the timetable is not present, but it says, Taylor Beasley, how will this affect nearby businesses? You know, I think in the long term, you know, a more walkable, bikeable corridor is always a good thing for local businesses. I don't think it's ever hurt a local business to have, you know, people feel comfortable getting up to that business and spending their money there in multiple different ways. I think during construction, you know, the city of Boston, I've been fortunate to work for them as a consultant in the past on construction projects, and has a very proactive approach to, you know, highlighting that businesses remain able to serve you during construction, and interfacing with local businesses so that they can, you know, make the best decisions to keep their operations going during construction projects. Bill, anything more you'd like to say about that one?
No, that was well put. Thank you. Thank you, Nate.
Happy to do it. All right.
Alan, can you take it? Nate, I think we're out of time, I'm sorry to say. And I want to give Alan time to make sure that he gets his closing remarks in.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate all of you for taking this time to join us this evening. We encourage you to contact us. Your comments are very important to us. I want to remind everyone that in order for your comments to be part of the official transcript, they must be received within 10 days of this public hearing. I'd like to thank the MassDOT panel this evening, and thank you all for participating in this public hearing. Have a good evening.